Good morning, welcome. This is Sunrise Daily, and just a quick reminder that it is the 30th day in the month of January. It would have been the last day of your legal tender tomorrow, but hey, yes, that's been moved.
So that's also part of the check.
Amaya Makine, good morning and welcome.
Well, add to that the fact that it is a beautiful Monday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, and you're welcome to the breakfast show, Sunrise Daily. I'm Kayode Okikilu.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning. I'm Mal with Yusuf.
Well, the chat this morning started in Lagos, so let's just go ahead and take it there. That there are two unfortunate incidents, actually, that one would look at. One, of course, is the accident that happened on the Ojuelegba Bridge. The circumstances around, no matter what the circumstances are, the fact that people died is always something very heartbreaking for anyone. All of the information that you need, I guess one will just have to go, fetch them. What we have is what we have. But another one, very unfortunate as well, that happened is what has been described as a political clash between two political parties, two rival parties in Lagos, that according to some reports say that 3 people may have been killed. How far that is true, I guess we'll wait for investigations and information from the police to confirm all of that, if that is not out already. But it definitely isn't like anything one would want to see. That incident is perhaps even confirmed by the fact that the governor of Lagos State refused to be a part of a campaign, of a rally, a governorship debate yesterday for that one reason. Troubling circumstances, electoral violence building up. This is not the kind of thing one wants to see.
And it's mixed feelings really for me. It wasn't a very pleasant weekend. From that incident on the Ojuelegba Bridge, by the way, just from December till this point, we've had at least 3 of them with casualties. In December, around the Papa Oshodi Expressway, there were 2.
Wow.
Yes, there were 2. One involving a 40-feet container. This was a 20-feet container, according to reports. Those ones, I think one of them, the driver was killed, the passenger escaped. The other one, 2 people were reported to have killed. Those were the reports that came in, even though it wasn't officially confirmed at some point. And now we have this one, 9 people killed, 2 children. I don't know how that story hit you, but for me, I thought, wait a minute, shouldn't we have gone past this? Shouldn't we have learned from this? Because time and again, we keep reporting one container or the other, especially around that axis falling. The Speaker of the House of Representatives also actually alluded to the fact that, in fact, on the same spot, we've had, events in the past. And for him, he was saying that perhaps there should be some sort of, this barricade. He described it as a barrier that such that those articulated vehicles carrying containers will not be able to drive over that bridge.
Can I count how many times those barricades have been bulldozed out of the way by those same trucks?
So, it just reeks of lots of things that worry me, that concern me, because if we seem to know the solution, he says, let it be those barricades such that they will have to just take under the bridge. I know there'll be questions whether or not the allowance under the bridge will be able to take the height of the containers. Is it 20 or 40 feet? Lots of issues. And, I was looking forward to that debate. Hoping that the governor would attend and speak to that, because that for a lot of people was a sore point of Sunday. Speak to that. What is being done? How are you partnering maybe with the federal government? If you see some of those roads are federal roads, all of those things come up right conveniently at times, and when you expect everybody should just take action. So I was hoping to at least hear some sort of, policy statement regarding that, as well as other issues. So it was again another downer for me, that for that reason, which you said earlier, the governor said he was not going to attend that debate. I know there are different angles to that. Some would say, perhaps that would also be another avenue to stamp your feet and say, well, we will not condone violence in whatever guise, either political or what have you. So, that was a platform. Incidentally, it's called the platform again, that a lot of people were looking to hear from not just the governor, but a candidate in this coming election. And for me, it was just a major downer. So it wasn't a very pleasant weekend. I'll just, stop now. I know from Abuja, the story must have hit you the same way it hit us here in Lagos, guys.
Well, absolutely, because you this kind of story, you just keep wondering and asking yourself for how long, and when this kind of things happen, having been in and around the news environment, you immediately know what to expect. They'll issue statements and tell you we're doing what we can. Sometimes they'll use that excuse me, good old words, we're on top of this, but these are lives, human lives we're talking about here. And what makes it a lot more sad and really unfortunate is that this is not the first time that this kind of scenario is happening. And you would expect that beyond what they say, you want to see measures that have been put in place. You want to see efforts being taken by relevant bodies to ensure that these kind of scenarios don't happen. Because from the look of things, the way things are at the moment, the way it comes across, even if you give them another 10 years, they will not have eradicated all this menace. It may just keep happening in the same way that it has been happening. And that's a really sad part, because it goes back to one of the points that I always like to emphasize, which I like to be, wish I was wrong on that one, is that most of these agencies, the VIOs, those government agencies, look, what exactly do you think they're doing to stop all of these things? Because sometimes they'll tell you, oh, yeah, if we clamp down on these chaps, we fear riots, we fear this, we fear that. But then you get to the offices, you readily see the cars that can pay the fines, that can afford the fines. Because there are cars that are nowhere near roadworthiness that are applying those roads. And, it goes back to all of those agencies, from the get-go. How do we get all our certification for vehicles to be on the roads in the first place? So when all of those things are not factored in, what do you expect? You will get this kind of results. So that's always the challenge. But who knows? We can only keep talking about all of these things and call them out, hold them accountable as much as we can. Because, look, if that were, for goodness sakes, anyone in Lagos, you might have even been plying that road at that point in time. Think about it that way. So that's why you talk about this, and then the way they respond to it is though, oh, well, it could be one of those things. That should not be the case. They have to ensure that they do better than what they're doing.
Oh, Chamberlain, I very little to add, but this is one incident too many. I'm really trying to recall the name of the young lady who lost her life. I think maybe a few years back, and the Lagos State government did say that they were going to be a little more stern with trailers that had containers on them. And I remember that I think the young lady's mother wanted to take the Lagos State government to court because she also felt that there was some government negligence. You and I can only do so much.
Yeah.
We're not the trailer owners. We're not the ones who are making people, well, some people will say the trailer owners are from amongst Nigerians, and that the drivers of this trailer, of these containers, are also taken from Nigerians. They're amongst Nigerians as well. And that when their trucks are wobbly, it is still Nigerians that will say, you feel manage them, you can manage it, let's just manage it. And people lose their lives. But there is a reason why we have government. There's a reason why the people decide that they will have people who will lead them, who will ensure that they are safe on the roads, in their homes. There is a reason why we have a government, and the primary reason is to ensure the safety and welfare, safety and security and welfare. Yes, I've added safety to it. I know that the Constitution talks about security and welfare. Yeah. But under welfare would be safety of the people. So it is not enough to make promises after an incident and then, a few years down the line or maybe a few months down the line. I don't think that this is up to 2 years now when this incident occurred. We're seeing another very tragic, very, very tragic incident. Not only were adults killed, children were also affected. So another generation already being impacted by our own negligence. Because we have to ask, how many more countries is this sort of incident happening on the daily? How many more countries are recording the sort of incidences that we're seeing, especially avoidable incidences like this with regards to containers on trucks? How many more? If we're the country which is leading in this regard, then we need to ask ourselves very tough questions. We need to ask ourselves, you know, what exactly we're doing. Just on Friday here, the new FRSC Corps Marshal was talking about the number of road crashes. And I think in Nigeria alone, we've seen an increase of about 22% in road crashes. Wow. These are all things that are related to safety. They are avoidable. We talk about insecurity, and some people will say, okay, maybe, you know, some of these things are a little out of our hands. Criminals will always be there. But safety is something that is, we all can pitch in. We all can say, even amongst the truck drivers, if they say that there's going to be a protest when you start to clamp down, incidences like this is what we use to press home the importance of what government is trying to, you know, regulate them on. Here in Abuja, I mean, just a few days ago, too, we also saw there's been no crushing, thankfully. But you see trailers that are on the verge, they're tilting like this, you know, and you're wondering, who is taking a look at these trucks that are on our roads? Are we really serious about the safety of our citizens? I want to believe, and really, Chikade, as you did mention, not just you, not just Lagosians, because whatever happens in Lagos, a lot of people are interested in all around the country. It is the commercial nerve center of Nigeria, and as such, whoever is going to be leading that state, people are going to be interested in that person. The platform was a veritable place for all of the candidates to have, you know, spoken about what it is that they really intend. And it wasn't just you who was disappointed. A lot of people, and they've gone on Twitter, social media platforms, to express their displeasure at the non-appearance of the current governor of the state for not showing up. It is really not, it is quite disappointing, so to add to that. But I'm hoping that, you know, we'll see further action on this, because I think the Lagos State government says they will prosecute, that they will prosecute people who kill. This is at least, this is second-degree murder. This is or manslaughter at the minimum. I'm not a lawyer. They would figure it out. But this sort of negligence, people need to understand that there are consequences for this sort of, you know, incidences, especially when lives are involved.
Yeah. On that note, we'll just go right ahead and take you through some of the dailies this morning. And we'll start with Vanguard newspaper. It's about the Naira notes. Oh, yeah. What a weekend it was for all of that scramble. You needed to have seen what was going on in different places. In fact, in some of the ATMs that had any wimp, if they had any wimp, any idea that this ATM was dispensing the, what now? Can't be almighty new notes, can it? Well,
almighty new notes, so precious new notes.
Well, look at that big lead right there. Buhari reps heading for clash over 10-day extension. So the news came through yesterday about this. Lawmakers say law must be duly followed. Describe extension as mere political gimmick. Minority Caucus hails Apex Bank over deadline extension. All old notes to be deposited in CBN by February 17. EFCC, ICPC operatives deployed in banks. Wait. What are they going to be doing? What, watching people who are coming in with money or what?
Je ne sais pas.
I'm trying to imagine a scenario. If you come with a bag of money.
We'll question you. Where did you get that money from? Why have you been keeping all of this money?
Okay, so
why are you hoarding it?
I'm just assuming. So if maybe I need to double check. What if the person says, "Well, has anybody reported that I committed a crime?" What would they say?
So let me give you a story I also heard over the weekend. So I heard that in the market in Abuja over the weekend, in Gariki market, for instance, beef was scarce. there was no beef for sale. What was the issue? They said they went to buy the cows from the cattle herders. They wanted their money. They wanted their money in cash, and they wanted new notes, which of course a lot of people didn't have. So, you know, maybe for those who were able to do transfers amongst the people that were banked, you know, they were able to get a few. So beat was scarce over the weekend. I don't know. I didn't go there, but that was the story. That was the report that reached my ear.
You can imagine the ripple effect that will have. But look at this other one here. Banks continue to dispense old notes. Limits ATM withdrawal of new notes. Why we are still dispensing old notes? Banker. Frustrated customers besiege banks, threaten shutdown. Different strokes for POS operators, widespread rejection of old notes. Wow. Oh yeah, and that's been happening too because, well, I guess with this extension, who knows? Who knows? Oh yeah, you get to see that story as well, above this Lee story, where we started off Black Sunday, 20 killed in Lagos. No.
Lagos, Ondo, Auto, yeah. There are two states there.
Yeah. Oh, okay, the combination of Lagos and Ondo auto crashes. And what you get to see in some of these cases, the authorities, they wait until you hit the roads, then they start chasing after those, when they is bolted from the stable. What happens from their departure point and those kind of things? Is there no way they could regulate and ensure that certain things are put in place from departure points before they get here? Well, don't ask me what you expect them to do. That your government, that's what they expect it to do. They promise heaven and earth when campaigning. So when you get there, we also expect those heaven and earth from them. So that's Vanguard this morning.
New Telegraph has this, also focusing on the new banknotes. It says, new banknotes, federal government yields to pressure. CBN extends deadline to February 10. Reps Committee kicks against 10-day extension, says position of law sacrosanct. OPS, as the organized private sector, cautions Apex Bank on current Naira crisis. The New Telegraph is the paper that I'm looking at this morning. Says 100 trillion Naira component of national GDP at risk as APC, PCC, CNPP commend Buhari CBN. FCTA arrests 47 roadside illegal POS agents. Okay. What are you chuckling at? How will you know the legal
priorities?
Ones? How would you know the legal ones from the illegal ones?
I'd like to read the story. Let me even understand it.
Just so we know, if you're just in case, I mean, because sometimes you might just be patronizing an illegal one, and oftentimes when they do this arrest, they don't differentiate between the person that has committed the crime or the person who is the illegal person and the person who is patronizing the illegal. All of you become illegal at that point. I don't know. But if I want to flip to page, they have a whole, how many pages dedicated to this? About 5 pages are dedicated to this. And look at this. 2023 staggered polls might be a recipe for violence. And that's according to the Sharia Council. Ask INEC to hold presidential Guba elections same day. Want census postponed. Okay? Ganduje meets with Buhari in Daura, says Kano now ready for his visit. Reveals 24 local governments have no banks. So these are some of the constraints that people might be facing with regards to this new currency. In Abuja, I mean, at some of the places where people were sure or certain that, you know, they could get the currency, there were long queues. And I was just saying, you know, how so easily we're getting used to queues and scarcity of everything. Scarcity of fuel, you queue at the filling station. Scarcity of even the currency to buy, is it to buy the fuel now? Because at the filling stations, they're refusing the old notes. And in some instances, these transfers weren't working. So it was a real conundrum for a number of people this weekend. And look at this, revenue, federal government agencies collection cost rise 28.24% to 422.39 billion naira. Okay, this is collection cost not the revenue itself.
Wait a minute. Are they collecting cash? I thought, what would this collection cost? Okay, well?
The cost of collecting it, there is a cost to collection.
I hope those are not bank charges, because I know that once you transfer something, you can get, even if you transfer 500 naira, 250 naira for electronic money transfer fee.
Well, if you're curious about the story, page 3 will give you all of the details.
Really.
Yeah. Oh, well, and if just we're talking about the FRSA, FRSA plans stop parks for long journey drivers to reduce crashes. Well, while this might be a good plan, they have to find out why some of the ones that have been built by state governments haven't worked. Or are they working? Because I know that a number of state governments have invested some resources in trying to build parks, stop parks for haulage drivers. And in some instances, they refuse to use them. And if you hear some of the reasons that we have heard behind the scenes,
wow. Like,
it will shock you. You will just be in shock that such a facility wasn't used because, oh well.
Sometimes, even, how about the Lagos new airport, where most international airlines couldn't even go there?
Okay.
So maybe you should Google the reason why they can't. Then you ask yourself, wait a minute, you mean some of these were not considered from the get-go? How come we spent all that amount of money and now they say, well, we can't even use it?
So I think that they need to do their research properly before they do this new parks, stop parks, which they're planning for the haulage drivers. We'll leave it there for New Telegraph newspapers.
Yeah, flip to this Nigeria newspaper this morning, and what do you have on its front page? That's it right there. Lawmakers reject CBN's 10-day extension, say it's political gimmick, want Emefiele arrested. CNPP calls on security agents to nab security hoarders, beg your pardon, currency hoarders. Stories on page 2, and you know what you will find out about this currency hoarding. And even, okay, there's a new one I heard now, currency, is it sellers or something like that, dealers, whatever it is. That's also right there. And how many people even know that it's against the law? But that story you'll find, of course, on page 2 of the paper. Under the picture on the front page, Ikone Abia PDP allots vacant Guber seat to late candidates zone. Find the story on page 4. And right beside that picture, you see the story highlighted earlier. Container crashes 9 to death in Lagos. Now you'll find out that happened, you know, on the bridge. Was there? There's so many questions to ask really on that matter. Is there traffic buildup, or was it one of those cases of the buses picking and dropping passengers and all these things? We ought to look at them. And what exactly happened? Was it that the tanker fell, or did it fall off its bed? All of these questions need to be asked around them. Beside the nameplate are 2 information: hiking electricity tariff unjustifiable, customers lament. Stories on page 20. Most certainly something lamentable. And right above that one, Nigeria decides 27 days to go. See, I'm not the only one keeping count. That's this Nigeria newspaper this morning, guys.
Take a look at Daily Trust newspaper. FG under pressure to probe herders' killings in Nasarawa. Magban says it's war crime, blames Autumn. NBA, NHRC seek compensation for victims' families. My hands are clean. Benue Governor. ACF, NCM demand investigation. So you get all of those there. But at the bottom strip, mixed reactions as CBN extends Naira deadline to February 17. 1.9 trillion Naira mopped up. Reps reject extension, vow to sign arrest warrant against Emefiele. You know, I just wonder, when banks keep saying we do not have these monies, and I've not heard the CBN sanction any of those banks for saying no, we've given you this amount of money. How much of it have you dispensed in comparison with, the clientele that you've got? So, so the question would then be, all right, so how much has been disbursed to this bank? So how much of these new notes have been disbursed to the bank? Why do they keep saying they don't have it? Why are ATM disbursing old notes? Somebody needs to be saying much more than it's already been said. The extension notwithstanding.
At least from today, we should not be seeing old notes in the ATM machines, at least at the minimum, because even though the people say the policy that the CBN has come up with is not a swap, it's for you to deposit, and then you get some new notes, but majorly they want you to be able to do online transactions. That's what they want. They're trying to reduce, cash.
They want to compel people to do online transactions.
Yes.
But we also know that I think they should have also ensured and put in place measures to make sure that if you're compelling people to go with these online transactions, the online infrastructure has got to be there.
Indeed.
So that if there's any defect whatsoever, swift should be attended just like that. So very swift. But who knows?
Well, they say they've collected over ₦1 trillion so far. They believe that about 900 billion cash of the old notes is still in circulation.
And the thing is, if you take, for instance, 1 million naira, okay, well, if you take 200,000 to the bank, you can't withdraw the same amount.
Why can't you? It's within the limit, the approved limit.
Above 500.
It's above 500, then you might have trouble doing that. The Abuja...
The FCC doesn't catch you.
I don't know, if it's your money, it's your money. Hey, if you worked for it, you worked for it. The Abuja Inquirer is the paper I'm looking at for you this morning, and they're also focusing on the story. It says, chairs as Buhari extends cash swap. That's what I was just trying to highlight. That's what people believe the policy is, cash swap. You take in all your cash and then you bring out new notes. But no, it's not a swap. You're supposed to take in your money and then as much as possible start to do online transactions. Maybe you can take a few cash within the limits approved by the CBN. But this is how it's been reported this morning. Chairs as Buhari extends cash swap. Citizens task CBN on availability of new notes. Ganduje lifts visit embargo on Buhari. We will monitor banks' votes. That's according to the CBN Governor Emefiele. And look at this. NYC gets new Director General, assumes office Monday. That's today. Just in case you're wondering what his name is, he is Brigadier General Yushau Ahmed, and he's a new substantive DG of the NYSC. Well, let us leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
Paper, and it's still talking about what you would call the hottest of topics this morning. New Naira notes. That's what you have on the front page, but that's not the only thing. New Naira notes, fuel crisis, compound Nigerians' woes. Check out the riders. Old notes withdrawal extended to February 17. Faces legal tests. Reps reject CBN's extension, insists on Emefiele's arrest if he fails to show up. Currency swap deadline puts 100 trillion naira national output at risk, says CPPE. Emefiele, banks raking 2.4 trillion naira currency outside system down to 25%. Youths call off planned protest at CBN headquarters. CBN to monitor sanction banks holding new Naira notes, and security consultant calls for presidential task force against saboteurs. The story is right there on the front page, continues on the inside pages of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Right under the nameplate, that story we talked about earlier, 20 die in Lagos or a road accidents. Story is right there on page 8. You're killing Nigerians in installments. Labour leader tells Buhari, and gunmen kill 5 security operatives along Enugu-Abakaliki Highway stories on page 9. A number of other stories on the front page of the paper. The back page has post-2023 leadership function and lessons for Nigeria. And that's the Guardian newspaper today.
Chip. Legal fireworks, CSOs, SANs caution Atiku, Tinubu against distractive campaigns, say resort to personal attacks indicates they've got nothing to offer. Warned candidate against heating up polity. There you go. Look at this one as well. It's just above this lead story. Customs dumps scanners at Apapa port. Orders 100% cargo examination. Can you beat that? Wow. You would have thought that. Is there a deliberate attempt not to make these scanners work? Because the only reason will be somebody somewhere is benefiting from that manual process.
Possibly.
If it's 100% cargo examination, do you know what that is doing to the economy? Or is it because they want to make more money from all of those? That's why they delay the cargo, you pay demurrage, and then things like that happen? Is this corruption in that sector? Blatant corruption? What if it is? Staring us in the face. What are we doing about that? Are we looking the other way? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? I don't know. It's just... All right, there you go. That ends it, actually, with a look at some of the dailies here this morning. You know you will always love you to weigh in on or any of those matters you had up to here. We'd like to hear from you. We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is what they call 21st century. When my customer say I want to use POS, I will just bring out my phone, open the application, press this code. I don't have anyone that using POS anymore.
Aside from those holding illicit and stolen Naira in their homes for speculative purpose, we do aim to give all Nigerians that have Naira legitimately earned and trapped the opportunity to deposit their legitimately trapped monies at the CBN for exchange. Based on the foregoing, we have today sought and obtained Mr. President's approval for the following. 1. A 10-day extension of the deadline from January 31, 2023 to February 10, 2023 to allow for collection of more old notes legitimately held by Nigerians and achieve more success in cash swap in our rural areas, in our villages and communities, after which all old notes outside the CBN loses their legal tender status. Our CBN staff, currently on mass mobilization and monitoring, together with officials of the EFCC and ICPC, will work together to achieve these objectives in the coming days. 2, a 7-day grace period beginning on February 10 to February 17, 2023, in compliance with Section 20, subsection 3 and Section 22 of the CBN Act, allowing Nigerians to deposit their old notes at the CBN after the February deadline, when the old currency would have lost its legal tender status. As at October 2022, currency in circulation had risen to 3.23 trillion naira, out of which only 500 billion was within the banking industry, and 2.7 trillion held permanently in people's homes. Ordinarily, when CBN releases currency into circulation, it is meant to be used, and after a friction of time, it returns to the CBN, thereby keeping the volume of currency in circulation under the firm control of the CBN. So far, And since the commencement of this program, we have collected about 1.9 trillion naira, leaving us with about 900 billion to 1 trillion naira, and 1 trillion naira to be collected.
How have you been handling the issues around new Naira notes? Some people can't wait to get rid of the old ones. Fear that, hey, something is going to happen and they won't be able to spend the money anymore. But then now that we have an extension of 10 days and another grace period of 7 days, perhaps making 17 in all. Well, that and a number of other issues we'll look at this morning with Professor Akpan Ekpo, who is a professor of economics and public policy. He joins us from Lekki. Thanks for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if it's okay to say this must have come to you as some kind of mixed feelings, root shock, the whole idea, the timeliness and everything. What's your general assessment of this whole melee about the new Naira notes, the deadlines, the extension and all?
Thank you very much. There's nothing absolutely wrong in redesigning the Naira note. Countries do it for several reasons. So there's nothing wrong, and the CBN has the right to do that. In order to maybe fight corruption, try to reduce inflation, have a handle of money supply and currency management. So there's nothing wrong with that. And then a lot of times we do that to be ahead of counterfeiters. You put new security features in new currency. Okay, so nothing absolutely wrong. Of course, there are issues in terms of whether what they've done will actually curb inflation. That's an issue, because our inflation is not really a demand issue. It's more of a structural problem and cost push. But having said that, the CBN gave a deadline, and they gave a deadline which people complain about that is not good enough. They wanted an extension. And for me, the central bank exists for Nigerian people. So at least they have listened to the pressures, to the cries of people, of Nigerians, and they've extended the deadline to February 10, I think. And after that, a 7 days grace period, whereby you can now deposit the money with the central bank. I hope they mean central bank via commercial banks, because central banks' offices are located in state capitals. I don't say people will walk around from where they are to go to the central bank and deposit the old notes. But at least they will listen to the cries of the people, and I'll give it an extension. And central bank also realized that the extension realized that once central bank issues a legal tender, is binding in the sense that on each, if you look at our notes, you never find an expiration date. So it's a liability to the central bank. But they've said that after the grace period, you can still go to CBN and deposit your old notes. But they haven't said that it's their liability, and so to say that it is illegal by just declaration, it may have to go more than that and make it maybe like a memo or like and make it a little bit much more like a legal issue, in the sense that after that date it becomes illegal, because once the CBN issues a legal tender, it's a liability to the bank. Okay, so there's nothing wrong. What should have been done, in my view, also is to raise awareness of Nigerians, especially those in the rural areas who are heavily unbanked, who are not that. Most of them are not part of the banking system. They should raise awareness. Right now, we are made to understand that in the market, people are even rejecting the old notes before the deadline.
Well, Prof,
Yes.
just one moment. We'll come back to the awareness because there's several people who consider it a huge part of the whole conversation. But you know,
Yes.
talking about the entire spectrum of the conversation, of the issue, as you have mentioned, there are those who are still wondering about the legality or otherwise of this extension. There are those who are asking questions around one thing or the other. You, of course, are aware that the House of Representatives has said, look, as far as they are concerned, the extension is a smokescreen, but as far as they are concerned, they want the CBN governor to be asked and answer so many other questions than that, you know, than has already been asked. So what is your take on that, especially coming from the House of Representatives, which is saying that, look, this whole thing, no, we don't buy it, we want more. The new Naira notes, according to them, this House of Representatives has rejected the 10-day extension granted by the CBN for the exchange of the notes. And they say that as far as they're concerned, the 10-day exchange for the exchange of the old notes is not the solution. And they want the CBN to abide by the principle of rule of law. Is there anything, in your opinion, that the CBN has done that contravenes the law?
In my opinion, the CBN has not done anything that contradicts the law, because the law itself does not say that the extension should be indefinite. But I think I would not want to reject the 10 days and the 7 days grace period. I think what the governor of CBN should do is to go to the House and let them have a discussion and discuss, closed door, because matters of CBN and other important banking or finance issues, you do it at closed door before you go to the public. So I think the CBN governor should honor House invitation so they can discuss.
Well, you raised issues earlier about the duration that the CBN has given for this whole Naira exchange. You talked about awareness. I've experienced this, you know, transition from one currency to one currency notes or tenders to the other in the little while that I have spent time on this earth. But I'm just wondering, how long do you think the whole conversation should have taken? There are those who are wondering the short time of, say, 3 months that the CBN gave initially wasn't enough.
The time is short. It may be short, but again, how short is short? You want to give it 1 year? What they do in advanced countries is that you will announce way ahead of time that you're going to redesign the currency. You announce it even a year or so, and then people become ready for it. But I think in our own, given the nature of our economy and the fact that we're having elections in February, maybe it will be difficult to extend indefinitely. But as I was suggesting, the CBN governor needs to go to the House, and I'm sure he has reasons for not going, but he should go to the House and then have a discussion and come to an agreement.
Yeah.
But within the law that I understand, maybe you don't know this, I was a member of the CBN board for years. They've not done anything wrong legally, but see, a law is law. But when you implement certain conditions, certain issues, I would suggest that there's need for the CBN governor and the House to discuss. And the House not just ab initio says we reject the extension, because by doing so, it sends a wrong signal to those who are watching our economy, especially at this time when the economy is at its lowest ebb.
Well, Prof, you said that, you know, I mean, when you asked the question, how short is short, you also alluded to the fact that the information ought to have come out a longer time, which is the history that we have. People are well aware that there's going to be a currency exchange, currency change. For quite a long time, the designs are put out, the colors and everything are put out for people to know that this is what is going to become a legal tender at a particular time. But it would seem like that didn't happen this time around. That's perhaps the reason people are asking questions about the duration.
Yeah, that wasn't done, and it should have been done, as I said. And that is why, in my perception, my view, the CBN governor, the governor of the Apex Bank should meet with the House and perhaps explain why that wasn't done. Because normally that should be the case. And that will not stop some people from not still being reluctant to change their own notes, but at least they were given enough time. Maybe he has a reason for doing that, but absolutely, that's the normal thing to do. You give enough time for people to be aware and get ready and apply. Especially those in small-scale businesses that operate cash all the time. Because when we say cashless society or economy, we are saying cashless. It doesn't mean that they will not use cash, So we shouldn't go overboard and appear as if we don't want any cash in the economy. So, but I think the way it is now, in order for proper management of the currency situation, there should be some kind of understanding and agreement so that it does not send wrong signals to those who are watching our economy. As I said earlier, especially at this time when the economy is in its lowest ebb.
Do you want to tell us why this particular currency, the introduction of new currency notes has become this controversial? Because some people say this is not the first time that we've done it, and it didn't appear to give this much problems at the times that we've done it before.
Well, I don't know, but I believe enough to say that this same president, during the Diabo regime, there was a currency change, and there was a problem there. I think it was about only 2 weeks or so. There was even fatality. People died trying to change their currency. So we should have learned from that experience, perhaps. I think it does the haphazard way we do things. One, secondly, the nature of the economy. The economy is not as modern as we think. The informal sector contributes almost two-thirds to GDP. So once you have informal sector contributing that large to GDP, it means that your economy is not that modern. Okay, we might have a few people, a few elites who feel that the economy is modern, but in real terms, the economy is still not that modern, isn't it? So you need to, for a long period, raise awareness, consciousness, a lot of advertisement all over the place, different languages, and so on and so forth. That, in my view, was not done thoroughly, and that's why we're having this problem. But for the CBN, the direction, because they have to have control of monetary policy. They have to have control of how much currency is in circulation. The CBN governor, you showed the speech, and it made it very clear. Almost 85% of the currency in the system is out of the banking system, and that's not good for the economy. So that's fine. Just the implementation that's becoming, in my view, becoming a problem. And I suspect perhaps also the deadline cannot be extended too close to the election. That's my suspicion, But I thought we would have learned from...
It's interesting that you talked about how, some almost 40 years ago when this, when the current president was head of state, this kind of thing also happened then. But I was talking about something a little more recent because the CBN governor made reference to the fact that we haven't changed currency in the last 8 years. 8 years ago when we changed currency, we didn't have this problem. Why do we have it now? And do you think, because even though the CBN has tried to deny or has said, no, there's nothing political about this, does appear now that they're up in arms with members of the House of Reps. Can we really dismiss politics from what is happening?
Well, this era is politics throughout, so it's difficult to dismiss politics, and that is why I said earlier, he needs to go to the House and sit with them and have a discussion, closed door. You are right, a few years ago when we changed the currency, it was a different, I think there was kind of, you are right, I think that was the time of Charles Chuma Soludo. So you cannot, the period is politically tense, and so you cannot rule out politics, but that's why I said it needs to go and discuss and clear the air for whatever it is worth. Definitely, there are issues about implementation, but as I said, it's not the wrong policy. You do it to put in more security features in the new currency. As you're even aware, even this new one, we are told that people have already started counterfeiting. It is is a very controversial issue, and I think we can reach an understanding by the central bank, the Apex Bank, in my view, meeting the House, because the House represents the people, and have discussion and sort out this matter. But at least for now, they've listened to some of the cries of the people by giving an extension for 10 days. After the grace period, they return to the CBN to be via the commercial banks. So that is the time of ourselves.
How worried were you? Because, it does appear that we've seen quite a number of, I don't want to call them flip-flops, but just on Monday last week, after the CBN, was it Monday or Tuesday, when the CBN held a Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the CBN governor reiterated that there was no going back on the deadline that they had given for the, for the use of the old currency. But just by yesterday, there was an extension given. I don't know, how worried were you when you saw queues of Nigerians trying to get a hold of the new currency, and the concerns that a number of other Nigerians, especially in rural areas, had with being able to exchange what it was that they had in their homes or in their possession?
Extremely worried. Extremely worried, because without the Nigerian people, the central bank would not exist. So I was extremely worried, and that is the major concern, the unbanked population. Let me just say, even personally, I had an experience. I went to my bank here and I couldn't get the new currency. They refer us to another branch. We went there, it was like a market. So let's hope that we'll see what happens after the 17 days. For me, he said no going back, but he has retracted based on pressure, perhaps, and let's see what happens. But definitely, he cannot put back the same amount of cash. He cannot put back the same amount of new notes to match the old notes. Otherwise, he will lose control of monetary policy. The idea is to mop some money. So that will be part of the problem also. And then also, the Apex banks should supervise the commercial banks. They supervise them, not just saying that we will inspect their votes. They should send people there to check whether this is happening, because the hardship. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so sorry to jump in. Just before you make that point, one wonders, this policy affects all Nigerians. So why do you say if he goes to the house, it should be closed door? Why not open where everybody can know what's going on?
Well, you see, when it comes to issues of central banking and banking issues, you first have a closed door, then you go to the public, because there are issues that will be discussed that might scare both domestic and foreign investors. So you first do a closed door, then you come out to the public, even within the house. That's what I'm saying. We don't know what how did I put it? We don't have all the facts that may create problems in the economy. So a closed door will be better first, and then they can come out to the main house and discuss it. That's the point I was making. Okay.
So the other point where you say that there are several, over 80% or so, who are not in the banking sector or something like that, if I heard you correctly, and that they need to come in. What would you then say to those who think, look, they feel that they're trying to compel them to come into that system, whereas the system, they don't see any reason why they should? So if the people are resisting or don't agree with that policy, does it make their jobs any more difficult? Or shouldn't they address those concerns before asking them or trying to give them the impression that, well, we're not forcing you to come in, but you need to come in to improve the system?
Fine, but the problem is that why should 80 to 85% of cash not be in the banking system, and yet it's being used? That's the problem. So that's an element of corruption, So that is what the central bank is trying to, in my view, indirectly trying to address. Why do you keep millions of naira in your vote in your house? That's the issue. Put it in the banking system, So because if you do that.
Prof, if someone were to say that,
they cannot
there are laws and there are agencies that and
they can
that are
track
there
the,
to
they can
ensure
track
that
the money, they
laws
can
are not
track the money,
violated. So
they
if they're
can,
saying, well,
they
people
can
are
track the
keeping this
money.
and there's, doesn't it
Yeah,
sound
but
a
we see,
little, it doesn't
no, you
add
see,
up when you say, well, people are keeping this. So if you know where they're keeping them, why don't you just go there and then do what you have to do? Because
no,
now
you
they
don't, no,
feel that this
no,
policy
you don't
is
know,
targeted at
you
a
don't
few
know,
people. And
no,
then some are even saying that it will affect operations for the 2023 general elections.
you see, you don't know where they are keeping the money, but if you put in the banking system, you can track it because there's a rule that if you put more than maybe 5 million, the bank has a right to alert the corrupt agencies, and that's perhaps why people, if you put the money in the system, they can trace the source, and that will help, in my view, fight corruption to some extent. And then, as you said, people also have used this money, the money they have, perhaps to go to the forex market and buy dollars and hold for options. And so the CBN is to have a handle, some kind of control, so they can have an effective money policy. Whether it will work or not is another matter. Okay, so why keep millions and billions in the house when we have banks? So there will be a reason why people do that. You can keep 10,000, 20, but why 1 million? Why 1 billion in the house? So now take the money to the bank so the central bank can know the currency, the amount of currency in circulation, which will help monetary policy and perhaps help inflation and help all of us.
Well, Prof, there's so many things, so many backstory to some of these matters, which unfortunately we won't have enough time to focus on, because when they say the governor of Kano was talking about how many local governments, over 10, 15, 20, don't have banks, and this has been on for years. So question is, why is that the case? Didn't the authorities know that this is the case? Why do we have to? Because you would have thought at some point it would have been necessary to ensure that these kind of scenarios don't happen. But Prof, now not many people are even talking about this policy in terms of how it will improve the value of the currency. Now the whole conversation about, is it witch hunting people? So does that not defeat the purpose for which this is coming through in the first place?
We purpose in terms of which purpose? Fighting inflation or corruption or monetary policy handle or what? We will not know until the exercise is over and begin to see the outcome. Okay, we can't do an ex ante. We have to look at what happens after the exercise is over. The only thing I said was that I'm not sure, from my little experience and the work I've done, that it will have any much impact on inflation. Okay, because our inflation is not a demand issue. Okay, but the other objectives of this policy we will see. We will see after the exercise is over. We'll do an analysis.
All right, Professor Akwanepo, we do thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right, we will be back in just a moment. Join us again. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Wow, so much happened over the weekend, and we expect a lot this week as well. INEC is in the burner for a lot. Even this week, there's remember the mock scenario that will happen today. We'll get to that. But Osun Tribunal judgment last weekend was a lot that jarred quite a number of people. I mean, other than the APC, because they'll be pretty happy with that one. And then the question of, will students be able to travel and go vote? So does all of these things affect what? Is it tantamount? Is there any iota of election manipulation? So all of this are part of what we will be talking about this morning. So I've got two gentlemen who join us here in the studios. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga, as well as Oluwole Osase, who's a former Director of Voter Education and Publicity for INEC. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for coming on today. Good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Well, it just got a lot of people thinking, what if we start from Oshun, for instance, and when that judgment came through, lots of people kept on calling and asking, and of course, they were all awash, wondering, so what does this then mean? Wait a minute, for voting with this new system that we're talking about, how did that ever happen? Did we spend all of this money to get to where we are? Was it human error? How did they, for any fail-safe measure? There were so many questions. And it's understandable because, they expected so much from INEC. Lots of people went to register this period thinking, oh, this time it will be foolproof. And then you get to hear over voting, they will definitely raise questions. And something that time, the system, the reportage, the results, as they trickled in, you were largely involved in that one. What were your impressions when you heard this judgment, for instance?
Well, so first, let me express my limitation. I'm limited by virtue of my work at Yaga Africa and by virtue of our involvement in that election. But three things just come to the fore. This particular case has sort of established and imposed confidence in the BVAs as a tool used by INEC to ensure that the transparency of the voting process is guaranteed. And I think contrary to opinions out there that the judgment attacks the BVAs and it impugns on the credibility of the BVAs, I think my personal position, it's to the contrary, that what the judgment has actually done, because we're having this conversation about overvoting because there was a device called the BVAS that was able to detect that. So I think to that extent, what we're learning from this particular scenario or this case is that the BVAS is a device that indeed can detect overvoting. I think the second point, and I'm resisting the temptation to make any comments on the judgment, and perhaps let me just leave it at that because again, this case is still ongoing. Yeah. And so I think it's just ethical to restrain myself from commenting further on this.
Understandably. But Mr. Uzi, I don't know what your excuse would be. You're the long guy, right? So people will expect that you understand how some of these things may have happened and what may be going through people's minds because they need a lot of clarity and understanding so they don't misconstrue things and go about saying, oh no, this is the cause or why this happened. Yes, we know it's still in court and it will go upstairs, as they say. But when Samson says that, yes, the BVAS was able to detect this, it wasn't done by the regular voter. There were officials who were supposed to make sure that these things don't happen. How come?
Good question, very good question. First of all, let me just quickly add to what Samson said, or reiterate what Samson said, that look, this judgment is a validation of the role BVAS has played in the process. Rather than being very negative about the whole thing, I think it exposed the overvoting. It was BVAS that exposed that as it were. And the fact that the BVAS report was relied on, but we have to be careful. Which of the BVAS reports was relied on? Was it what was transmitted to the server, to the back end, or was it the BVAS itself? I think we have to explain and break this down to people. The majority of the tribunal, the chairman and the second member, relied on the initial report, and it's an initial report certified by INEC, admittedly. It's initial report of the back end. It was downloaded from the server, transmitted. But a couple of days later, INEC used the word synchronize. I'm not too sure I like that word, but you synchronize and say, look, have all the results been transmitted, have all data been transmitted from the machine, the BVAS itself, to the server. The machine is a physical one, and then it transmits it to a server. It now went, checked and said, there's a problem here. The BVAS report now downloaded itself, now brought it out, we now examined each BVAS machine, and now found out, no, some data was not transmitted to the server. And it wasn't a unanimous judgment. The second member, the Honorable Justice, who dissented from his two colleagues, said, look, I would rather use the primary source of this information, and the primary source of this data is actually the machine itself. It's basically a computer. So rather than go to the server where it transmitted data to, I would use the printout from the machine itself. The machines were tendered. So were the reports from the server. And there ought not to have been a discrepancy. But somewhere along the line, not all the data had been transmitted as at the time the APC obtained the certified copy of the server reports, initial server reports.
I mean, we know that there are several issues on that one.
Yes.
Because, yes, you say that word, you're not sure they should have used that word, because it's synchronization, because it proved to be problematic in the judgments. If you read through all of those, you see clearly.
Correct.
But when you then say that it wasn't transmitted, but that was a certified copy. Yes. So the questions, two separate certifications were sent. Correct. APC had one, PDP had one.
Yes.
And so the judges had to say, look, what's going on here? But they then didn't use, you said the other judgment, the minority one should have said they should have used the one that came from the machine itself.
Yes.
But maybe you're just trying to fast track, but when you say it wasn't transmitted, doesn't that raise questions concerning the entire process? Because number one, if it wasn't transmitted, why wasn't it transmitted?
It wasn't transmitted early enough.
Early enough.
Before the first certification.
Okay, so now, when they then went ahead and gave those parties those results, I mean, those certifications, which highlighted two different scenarios, that itself proved to be an error.
Well, it happened. It's a factual situation. When you say it's an error, I don't know how to place it. In the sense that, as at the time, the thing was transmitted, but had not registered in the server due to whatever reasons. And I'm also, like Samson, trying not to go too much to the merits of the case to prejudge what the Court of Appeal and maybe the Supreme Court will say. And we have to be careful in doing this, that there's one thing what actually happened, there's another thing that what was demonstrated in court. The court will rely on exactly what was demonstrated before it, not necessarily other information, other materials that were not available to the court as at the time it was writing its judgment. We are bound by the record of the court. We are bound by what happened in the tribunal itself. So basically, my understanding is that, yes, it was transmitted, but it had not been registered in the server as at the time INEC gave the first report. And when they discovered, they sent another report to the APC and to all the parties. When PDP applied, it was about 2 weeks later. They now sent and sought one after, look, this is what happened, and explained the whole thing. But of course, they chose the one they wanted to. And yes, because that mistake had been made in the first place, any person to whose advantage it is will naturally exploit that. That will appear is what happened.
But Samson, do you think that how much of a challenge would this be for the voter and for the commission to explain to Nigerians that, look, in case, because I'm sure they might have read several responses and comments all over the place concerning what people think, because INEC cannot afford to allow the people to have the wrong impression of this, because this is what they've been working for almost for the next 3-4 years now. They have to have the right impression. So how much of a challenge do you think the commission has, and CSOs and the media, to ensure that, look, we focus on the right things and let people know that we can't throw the baby with the bathwater?
So there are 3 things that I expect that the commission will do today. First, is the commission cannot say to Nigerians, this matter is sub judice, and to that extent, we cannot comment on the merits of the case. Okay. I think that this is an opportunity for INEC to actually explain to Nigerians what's the entire value chain of the results management process. It's there in the guidelines, no doubt. We do our bit with the election 101, but INEC needs to just, even if it's an explanatory that says this is how this process actually works, to help people and members of the public understand, and not say because the matter is still in court. We know that, yes, the matter is sub judice, but then there are still strategic communications that INEC needs to undertake today and this week, so members of the public can understand, what has happened and to impose confidence.
Sure, before you get to the second point. Now, if INEC were to do that, How do they deal with, because you know that people will twist whatever they say, they'll misconstrue that, they'll do whatever. How do they guard against, for instance, playing into the hands of politicians who will say, oh, okay, so is this explanation targeted at making one party look bad?
I think the question is not about, it's not about making a party look bad. It's about stating the facts. The institution of INEC is the major umpire that organizes elections. The processes in contention are INEC's processes, right? It is possible that there was misunderstanding of first the provisions of the law, the provisions of the guidelines, as well as INEC's processes in the course of the determination of this matter. And so this is an opportunity, you know, to explain that to Nigerians. It is subject to several interpretations, and the commission has enormous powers vested on it by the Constitution. So you cannot refrain from performing your function on the basis of the fact that it may be misconstrued by different political actors. That's one. Secondly, when we did the election results analysis dashboard with channels, one of the recommendations and lessons learned from Ekiti and Osun was that INEC should transmit and publish the accreditation data on the BVAs on the IREV on election day. If that had been done, we will not be having this conversation. And I think that if there's one lesson to learn just at this particular stage, is the salience, the importance of transmitting and publishing accreditation data on the BVAs, on the IREV. So, when people visit the IREV for the general elections, they will see and compare. Because if you had done that, we won't be having this conversation. Because once the accreditation process is concluded using the BVAs, there's human interference. So that figure has to be copied and recorded on the result sheets. And in the course of that, there could be several issues. It could be computational inaccuracy. It could just be sabotage. There are several things that will come to play. And I think it's a big lesson. Why I'm highlighting this is, yes, the law says 60 days for appeal. We're already 20-something days to the elections. So perhaps this matter would not be concluded before the general elections, before the presidential and even the governorship elections. But there are lessons that we can draw from this. So that's the second action I expect. The third, action that I also expect from INEC, and it feeds into the first one, is this point about whether synchronization or two or different BVAS reports. Yeah. It is clear, and I wish that, when the first BVAS report was issued, a caveat would have been introduced, would have been stated.
Saying that probably this was interim report?
Exactly, or these are provisional. Because we know how these things actually work, that it's not automatically uploaded on the cloud. And it's just standard technological processes that first, for the synchronization to happen, even though Uzi doesn't like that word, you need internet. There's several conditions. And so, I think subsequently, when you're issuing documents, because documents that emanate from INEC are legal documents, if they're incomplete, you can indicate that, yes, this is CTC, but with a caveat that this is provisional because there are certain processes that are still being undertaken. But the way it is, it creates room, for suspicion, and integrity questions will be raised. So I think these are three sort of critical things that I expect the Commission will undertake.
Indeed, for CSOs like yourself and, of course, many people within the elite and also, of course, political parties, they will be interested in the details. But for everyday Nigerians, for people who just want to be able to cast their vote and know that the results of their votes count, shouldn't it be enough for them to know that it was the BVAS, it was the use or the deployment of the BVAS that was able to point out this overvoting?
Absolutely, and that's why the explainer from the Electoral Commission is important. It's the institution that organizes elections. Yes, we as civil society and media, we can do our bit, but the Electoral Commission has to speak. And when it speaks, it would inspire confidence on the part of the people. And just even the fact that, yes, and like I mentioned initially, that this entire process has reinforced the essence of the BVAs. And I don't think it delegitimizes the BVAs in any way. We're having this conversation because the BVAs, actually function in the election. And so just reposing that trust and encouraging voters that when they go out in the next couple of weeks, they must ensure they are accredited with the BVAs. Because if you're not accredited with the BVAs, you cannot vote. And if you vote without accreditation, then it will detect overvoting. Because it's only the records on the BVAs that will determine, the conclusiveness of the election or the credibility of the election. So for Nigerian voters who are out there, when you go out to vote, even if a presiding officer says or issues you a ballot paper without accrediting you with the BVAs, you have a duty to insist that you must be accredited using the BVAs. And if that is not done, then just know that there's something sinister at play. And I think that that's something Nigerians need to insist, because we from civil society do have confidence on the BVAs, despite the challenges and the limitations. But it's indeed a game changer. And this entire process has established and reinforced that fact.
For a number of Nigerians, they were hoping that the transparency which they thought the BVAs was bringing in would reduce the incidences of people going to court to contest the elections. Were you a little surprised that the parties in this case insisted on going to the tribunal?
No, I'm not at all. I think we're quite a litigious society, especially when it comes to political issues. That's borne out. I don't know any other country that's as litigious as we are when it comes to such issues, because nobody accepts defeat in the polls, and they exploit all loopholes, they exploit all situations, and they clutch at everything they can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. The BVAs wasn't the only issue in contention in this election. There were actually 3 grounds, one of which was issue of certificate forgery, which I think had previously been dealt with. But that's not the issue. They will always look for ways and means. There are more than 700 pre-election cases, nothing to do with BVAs now, pre-election cases arising from the party primaries, more than 700, affecting just about every party. More than 700, that says a lot. And there's, almost all of them are still pending at different stages. Some are still in the Federal High Court, some are in the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court, more than 20, 30 of them are already in the Supreme Court or have been determined by the Supreme Court, and many more are still there. In fact, the courts, Federal High Court, Court of Appeal, and hardly do any other matter presently. They're dealing with re-election matters, political issues.
Well, we'll go to break now, but are you a student? Do you know if you'll be able to vote on that day? All right, so are there issues with election manipulation? Well, these are some of the other matters we'll talk about when we return in just a moment. Stay with us.
Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Itodo, just before we segue into other issues on the lineup this morning, and at the risk of putting you on the spot concerning this election, how is it possible? How I'm trying to look for a way to ask you this question specifically. There is overvoting, there is BVAs, there isn't supposed to be overvoting. Consequently, whoever made the announcement of who won the election in Osun State wasn't supposed to come up with any figure beyond that which was revealed to them. So how could there have been overvoting when the BVAs was supposed to stave that off? How did those extra figures come to play in the first place?
Well, you said you don't want to put me on the spot, but you've just put me on the spot with your question. But I think if you take a look at the case, and I think for a comprehensive understanding of this particular case, it's important that people go back and look at the petitions as well as the respondents' reply and see the background to all of this, and just to save the public the pain of doing that. If you say, how did overvoting occurs? First, let's explain what overvoting is. Overvoting occurs when the total number of votes cast exceed the total number of accredited voters. the BVAs did accredit a certain number of people at those polling units. But the BVAs does not automatically transfer data to the INEC election results viewing portal. It is still retained in the machine. And so during the course of collation, or the course of after election has been concluded at the polling units, the presiding officer takes the BVAs, looks at the number of accredited voters, and then manually records it on the result sheet. Now, in that particular process, several things could have happened, and this is what the court needs to also sort of unravel. Did the presiding officers, in recording the number of accredited voters from the BVAs on the result sheet, did they record the accurate number of the voters who are on the BVAs on the result sheets? That's the first question. The second, and as Barrister Uzi noted, that if you look at the findings from this particular case, that the machines were brought to the court, and they looked at the figures on the BVAS machines vis-a-vis what was recorded on the result sheets. And you can tell that from the data on the BVAS that was present, there seemed to be some consistency with that figure, as well as one of the BVAS reports, that INEC had tendered in court. And this just sort of exposes loopholes. And this is why I advise that INEC needs to explain to the public that the BVAS detects overvoting. It's just that the time for which the data for accredited voters is published is not automatic. This is why we have recommended from the election results analysis dashboard that it is important that at the end of voting on the day of elections, INEC should transmit and publish the number of accredited voters on the IREV, and not just rely on the recorded data of accredited voters on the result sheet. So once it's there on the IREV, anybody on election day can go to the INEC election results viewing portal, see what the data is on the BVAS, as well as what is recorded on the result sheets. And so I'd say I'll just leave it at that point so I don't delve into some aspects of the case.
Well, I apologize for putting you on the spot. I think you've done some justice to the question intended, because people will be wondering, especially as we build up to this next election. So, well, Barrister Osazeuzi, one of the other questions to ask is, now this is a test case for us. We've had Ekiti, we've had Anambra, and a number of people have said, look, if INEC has grown integrity up until now, this Osun is another case in point, but then now we have what we have. But the general election of this month and next month, they are much bigger, much larger. The circumstances, the logistics are a lot heavier. How do we ensure that such a thing as this does not happen again? We know that there is a provision for INEC to review itself, if that's the language to use according to the Electoral Act, that after 7 days, the INEC can say, okay, well, what we did was right, or no, we need to have a correction. So how do we ensure that such a thing as this does not happen again? In which case now we'll still have some back and forth at the courts.
Thank you. Well, due diligence, that's the only thing I can really say. The INEC has to be extremely careful about the caliber and type of people it recruits for this kind of exercise. But Samson has made allusions to it. Let us not think that something untoward definitely did happen. The tribunal did not find that there was a malpractice in the sense that results were falsified. I think it's important to clear that issue. In fact, I think one of the witnesses came and said there were only actually 6 incidents of overvoting, only 6 out of the total number of thousands of polling units that were in Osun State. And if INEC is more careful about the kind of people it recruits, but we must point out also that mistakes are a human thing. And Samson told you that in collation, they have to look at what's in the BVAs. Actually, it starts from the polling units. The presiding officer will now have to look at the total number of accredited people from the BVAs and enter that figure into the ECA, the first result sheet in the polling units. And they do the same thing at collation level at all levels. Sometimes you have to give your phone number, your bank account, and sometimes you make mistakes. It's a human thing. Mistakes might be made, but we have to be careful that those mistakes are not deliberate in some instances. With 150-something odd thousand polling units, truly there probably will be some mistakes, but we're hoping that those mistakes will be so few and not like the 755 that we said happened in Osho. But I think INEC will argue that only 6 of those things where there was overvoting. And overvoting may have been due to human error, not as if it was a deliberate attempt by the presiding officers to falsify the results. It benefits nobody because they did not say that these votes were in favor of A or in favor of B. There was no evidence that it was synchronized and said, look, let us do these things to favor party A or party B. It was an exploitation of what was wrong. And then the second issue is that if that was the case, should the results have been nullified, voided, and then you go back to hold election in those units or not? Those are issues that will be unraveled by the Court of Appeal. I'm sure that will be covered by some of the grounds of appeal that the lawyers have said they will file.
Well, Chamberlain just did say earlier before we took a break, asking students whether or not they were sure they would be able to vote. Now, it's a concern also for a member of the House of Representatives, Ibrahim Tukura, who said the students are busy with academic activities and INEC is engaged in distributing PVCs at the wards across the 774 local government areas of the Federation, which deprives students of the opportunity to collect their PVCs. Do you see this as a significant conundrum?
Well, it's something that is worrisome and something I think, an impasse that I think can be worked out. But first of all, the presumption is that the majority of students did not register where they are presently. I don't know whether that is correct or not, but certainly I'm sure some people registered while they were home or while they were not on campus. But a lot more also registered on campus. I recall that a couple of years ago, the EU, YAGA, and its partners went around campuses and got people to register on campus. So during that drive, a lot of people actually did register on campus. So the presumption that all the students did not register on campus might not be a correct one. But between INEC, the NUC, stakeholders, I'm sure something can be worked out. Good thing that the period for collection of PVCs has been extended. So I think that something definitely can be worked out. But I don't see it as a major fundamental issue. An inconvenience for some people, definitely, but an amicable resolution can be worked out, I believe.
So, Samson, would it be out of place, for instance, if people were to interpret that amicable solution to be, give them a public holiday, let them go ahead and vote and travel if you want to, go and vote?
Well, I don't agree with Uzi when he says he doesn't see that as a fundamental issue. Okay. I think it's a fundamental issue. Now, when people go to vote, they are enforcing certain fundamental rights. The right of expression, because as you vote, you are expressing a particular choice. So it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. The second is the freedom of association, because you're, to an extent, also associating yourself, particularly for people who are members of political parties. And I think that the state needs to consider this important to safeguard these rights and not place impediments on the way of the students who are so enthusiastic and they want to cast their vote. Secondly, what INEC official data says is close to 40% of those who are on the register are students. And so, whilst I agree here, there are students who registered on campus, but there are also other students who registered while schools were on strike. And so I think what needs to be done here is to looking at the time limits and the complexity of managing this entire situation, what can be done. The first, you've had schools who have scheduled examinations in the week of the elections. I think that action or those schools need to reverse that, because when you schedule exams during elections, what you're simply telling students is forget about voting, because you have to write your exams, because you know the consequence of not writing your exams. It means you're going to resit that particular course, or to a large extent, some might even fail. So I think that those schools who have scheduled exams that week will need to reschedule the exams so that students can participate and go cast their vote. The second is for students who registered at home and are unable to collect their PVCs. I think that with this extension, if it is possible, to encourage those students to travel to collect their PVCs, but there's no guarantee that when they go back home, they're going to get their PVCs, because there are cases of unprinted PVCs. And I doubt even with this extension, we will still have uncollected PVCs. So I think just even creating that room and that opportunity and recognizing the need for these students to cast their vote, I think it's something that we can all do. The third, and perhaps, the last point around this is, yes, the NUC, INEC, and not just the NUC, but you have other commissions, regulatory institutions of polytechnics, because these institutions, INEC also draws its pool of ad hoc officials from these institutions. And so you can have school sessions running that particular week of the elections. And so even if schools don't shut down, but then you can have that period free. So for students who want to travel, to go home to cast their vote, for students who are going to be engaged as ad hoc officials, we don't, as a country, deprive them, first, of their voting rights, two, and then also, stifle their educational aspirations. Because when you don't create room for them to participate, the major priority of every student now is their school. They need to get through with school. And so let's structure this in a way that it is convenient for the students to exercise their franchise. In any case, because they are also Nigerians and they constitute the largest bulk of our population.
Yeah, that's 40.8% of those who registered actually on this matter.
Okay.
On the election manipulation matter?
Indeed, that's what I was about to just swing to, because just on Friday, your CSO, in conjunction with a number of other civil society organizations, came up with the election manipulation risk index. What was that about, and what exactly were you trying to highlight?
So first, the election manipulation risk index looks at 6 variables. It's a scanning tool. And for us at civil society, we want to draw the attention of stakeholders to the insidious nature of election manipulation. A lot of people think elections are only manipulated on election day. And no, elections can be manipulated before election day, because election is not an event, it's a process. And when you undermine and compromise processes leading up to the elections, it raises question about the legitimacy of electoral outcomes. And so what we did was to look at 6 variables. What are these variables? One is INEC capture, and each variable has its own indicator. So INEC capture, has about 5 indicators. You look at the appointment of recs with partisan backgrounds. You look at the attacks on INEC offices. You also look at, this mobilization of party supporters as ad hoc officials. And then issues relating to untimely release of INEC funding, because those are ways you can stifle the Electoral Commission. And this level of political interference with the Electoral Commission can impugn on the credibility of elections. We looked at the second variable around resistance to BVAs. The third one is also voter suppression that is also widespread across 32 states. We also look at history of election manipulation, look at states where they have history of falsification of results, over voting. These are incidences that are already captured, not just in INEC reports, but also judicial pronouncement. We also looked at things like election litigation, frivolous litigation in the build-up to the election to undermine the credibility of the process. So these are sort of the 6 variables with the indicators. And based on our sort of analysis, we categorize states into high risk, medium risk, and low risk. So any state that has more than 3 variables amongst the 6 variables is considered a high-risk state. And based on our analysis, there are 22 states with high risk of election manipulation. There are 12 states with medium risk, and then 3 states with low risk. We're going to be releasing 3 iteration reports throughout the elections. And so our expectation is that the reds that you see on the map will switch to yellow. And if it switches to yellow, then we can reach a level of comfort. But currently, it is important that citizens and stakeholders in those states keep an eye on those 22 states, including the 12 states that have medium risk, because the probability that they might switch from being medium to high risk, it's also there as we build up to the election. So it's actually fluid, and the goal is to help citizens understand election manipulation, but also look at risk mitigation measures. And I give a classic example of, for instance, some of the risk mitigation measures that we mentioned, particularly on voter suppression, because we're speaking about, you know, students. When you don't, so it is just confusing what's happening across some states. INEC on one hand says they've printed the PVCs. People show up to collect their PVCs. They are told their PVCs are not ready. And I've seen cases where, you know, voters have gone to collect their PVCs. At the first instance, they told them the PVCs are not ready. But they insist. And from nowhere, the PVC shows up.
Whoa.
And so it raises question. And the statement INEC also issued, and it's repeatedly mentioned this in a statement, that is investigating these cases of deliberate attempt to restrain or some of its officials either extorting people, but also not issuing those PVCs.
That's
and I hope that
too.
it is manipulation, because when you suppress votes, you know, what you do is you want to dilute, you know, the impact or the voting strength of a particular set of people, and you prevent them from voting. It's the same thing about the PVC buyout. Because across states, politicians are buying PVCs off people. Why are they buying PVCs off people? Because they don't want those people to cast their vote. So you are suppressing their votes. And that is the variable that is prevalent across 32 states compared to other variables in our analysis in the Election Risk Manipulation Risk Index.
Well, I'll ask you a further question, but let me ask Mr. Uzi, you know, as somebody who's worked with INEC, when you saw that report released, maybe you just had a cursory look at it, how did that come across to you?
The reports by Yaga?
Yes.
Well, it's a good job, a wonderful job. I happened to be there when, and I was fortunate to have a preview of the report before it was even actually officially launched. It's something that all stakeholders have to take a closer look at, especially the security agencies and the Electoral Commission. Some of the issues highlighted are very common, very well known to us, to everybody. But there should be a deliberate attempt to reduce the risk level such that each and every state should be low risk. You cannot completely eliminate them. You cannot completely, there's suggestions in the reports and recommendations which will go a long way. But let me take electoral litigation. It's not litigation itself that's the problem, but it's the quantity, the numbers of litigation. You overwhelm the courts. Some judges have fallen ill because they still have to write longhand. They still have to record everything. They still have to give judgments. And a particular judge had about 53 cases to handle. You know, task forces were set up, and all cases are in the Federal High Court.
But Mr. Uzi, pardon me to jump in, but people also say, look, does INEC actually see that as election, as manipulation? Because some of them claim that INEC themselves caused these things. So
no,
that's why politicians have to go to court.
These are pre-election matters, that intra-party arising from party primaries. The 700 I mentioned that has nothing to do with INEC, but INEC is a defendant in all of them.
Some say that INEC themselves, because when they say, well, we monitored this, no, we didn't monitor this, and those kind of things, they say, well, they are part of the problems.
In most of them, I happen to be involved in quite a number of them. In most of them, INEC had no role to play. Some INEC brought reports, some INEC did not go, some were postponed. There's a particular case that we're handling where a presidential candidate say should declare him as not qualified or as disqualified because he took honorary citizenship of a city, for example. We have all sorts of cases. You'll be amazed at some of the cases being filed in court. And You know, some may get judgments.
I think the one that worries me, the indice that really worries me the most is number one, INEC capture.
Yes.
That is serious.
It is.
I mean, this is coming at a time, because I'm also looking at the timeliness of this report. I know that what you're trying to do is, put stakeholders on notice, and you want the people to be educated. But this is also at the time when people should have confidence, because INEC right now, is telling people we're ready to conduct these elections. They will go on as planned. Yes, there are a number of challenges what they're looking at, but they're saying we're on top of the game, and it's going to go on regardless. But we have a number of headwinds. We've seen that of the Osun elections now, raising questions about whether or not the BVAs has really made a difference to our elections, even though INEC maintains, and even you have also reiterated, that the BVAs has helped a great deal. But when you begin to see indices that talk about INEC capture, and it's something that we know, as you said, is a process, how do we begin to vet, for instance, the people within INEC a few days to the elections? How does that affect the confidence of the people in looking at the institution meant to conduct free, fair, and credible elections? Let me ask you first.
Okay, it's a delicate situation, and if we look at the indices of those INEC capture, there are so many variables. Part of the thing, for example, is appointment of INEC commissioners and on officials. That has nothing to do with the commission itself, but has everything to do with the appointing authority. And civil society, the media, a lot of people made a lot of noise, even when some of these people went for screening before the Senate. In the Senate's wisdom, they found that they found them appointable, and so they were appointed, although we've had incidences where certain people were not found appointable and were dropped, which is fair enough. But there are so many different things. We cannot but help to try to build confidence. There's a short-term solutions, there are long-term recommendations being made. Long-term, of course, the law says, the Constitution says you don't appoint partisan people. Unfortunately, the Constitution does not say if I was a partisan today, I could be non-partisan tomorrow, whatever else. It doesn't make reference to a length of time after which you may have held public office or you may have been a party member. It doesn't. So there's some challenges with that. In everything we do, we almost have an eye on electoral reform. Yeah. And so those are things. But in the terms of the short term, those INEC can appoint, for example, returning officers, collation officers, and officials for the election, it must ensure that they are, as much as it practically can, that those people are not partisan. They are not, they've not publicly demonstrated favoritism towards any candidate or sympathy for any candidate or political party. If there are reports of that and they are credible and there's enough time to investigate that, then those people must be dropped. But sometimes some people are honest and straightforward, have integrity, but because you cannot compromise them, one party might just write a petition. And if you drop everybody just on baseless petitions, then you'll have nobody to conduct an election for you.
I want to ask whether you think this will have any effect on the confidence levels of the people.
Well, quite frankly, Nigerians they've been following this process. It will, and this is why you have it's risk, because the election manipulation risk index is a scanning tool that should help citizens understand this, and there are risk mitigation measures. And just to harp on the point about confidence, there are a lot of confidence building measures that INEC needs to take. We started this segment of the show about how the commission should communicate with Nigerians. The second is there are states where we know the background of some of those resident electoral commissioners, and as part of confidence building, INEC can actually deploy people who have unimpeachable, credibility, people who have competence, people who have character, as a risk mitigation measure. Things like the HODs of ICTs, the HODs of operation, the administrative secretaries. In these states where, we have some recs that are being deployed, you can appoint, people who are incorruptible to keep those people in check. There are also issues around due diligence on the recruitment of ad hoc officials who will be managing this particular election. So there are several confidence-building mechanisms and actions that INEC needs to take. Stakeholders also need to inspire confidence. And quite frankly, with all of this that is happening, INEC has a unique opportunity. A unique opportunity has been presented to the Electoral Commission to not only set the record straight, but to also inspire confidence. And I believe that in INEC, there are people who are incorruptible. They are people who have character, who have high regard for integrity. And those people would need to be placed in strategic positions to limit any form of manipulation. But then it's also the political interference with INEC. You read in the papers where there have also been attacks on INEC servers. You can just tell that the politicians are going for a broke in this election. And if it means putting more pressure on INEC, if it means interfering with INEC, if it means compromising INEC officials, they are willing and prepared to do so. And our duty, you know, as citizens, is to, yes, support INEC, protect INEC's independence, but also call out these actors who are interfering with the operations of the Electoral Commission.
All right, we need to go. There are several other issues that need to be called out. I mean, I've seen, I heard it before, but now they're bombarding me again with some of these things. They say that when you go to collect your PVCs, that they're actually asking them to thumbprint. And you wonder, why would anybody ask anybody to thumbprint before you collect your PVCs? So that is not part of the requirements to pick up your PVCs. So
no, it is. It is part of the requirement. The standard operating procedure. Yes, so you just thumbprint to indicate that you've collected. You either sign or you thumbprint. It's just that there's inconsistency because a lot of people have also asked that question. And that cannot, it's the sheet, yeah, it's a collection register. It's different from the ballot paper. Yes, it's just acknowledging that you've collected your PVC, so that tomorrow, if someone else had collected your PVC and you claim that, there was collection by proxy, INEC will have evidence to show that, hey, isn't this your thumbprint or isn't this your signature?
Okay, but so what about when people say that, look, the sheets that they give to them didn't look like an INEC sheet, they just thumbprinted and they're wondering, this looks a bit odd. Is that supposed to be the case?
No, the proper register.
No, it's a proper collection register. It's there. There's a column for it in the collection register. But in some locations, you will find there's no collection register. People have to write their names in those cases. And again, on election day, come on, guys, you'll be given a ballot paper. If there's any thumbprint on that ballot paper, reject it. It is not your thumbprint. And quite frankly, I think that in all my years of working on elections, at least for elections in Nigeria, I have not seen cases where already thumbprinted ballot paper is issued to a voter and before the voter casts a vote. In any case, if there are two thumbprints on a ballot paper, it's voided. So I think this misinformation, we need to correct it. It's actually fake news. But then anything is possible. This is Nigeria. But vigilance is important. On election day, they will issue you a ballot paper from the booklet, and that ballot paper would not have any thumbprint. If it has any thumbprint, reject it and ask for a ballot paper without any thumbprint.
So there are several issues which, of course, we'll pick up much later about the responsibilities of party agents on this election day to ensure that no untoward scenario plays out. What happens to ad hoc staffs if they are the ones who were culpable in that serial overvoting? There's several issues, really, but we can't touch on all of those. Hopefully, as we progress, we'll keep going on. This is voter education matter. It's not an easy thing. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming. Samson Intodo and Olole Osaze-Uzi. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That is the show today. We thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain as well. Have a good day.
Thank you. I'm Maokwe. We'll see your mails. Hopefully, we'll take them tomorrow. I'm Maokwe Yusuf.
You still have time to go get your PVC. Please do quickly. I'm Aya Makinde. Have a wonderful day.